Hello, my name's Mark Einetten. What you're about to enjoy today is an interview with that is part of the American Academy for Park and Recreation Administration's Legends program. The Legends program is an effort that was developed by the Academy to record the wisdom, advice, and sage stories of people that meant an incredible amount to shaping our profession of parks and recreation. Each year, the Academy nominates and selects a few people who are the legends that they feel need to be recorded for the rest of us. This year, our newest legend, who's here with us today, is Mr. Harvey Faust, who recently retired 2 or 3 years ago?
2003.
2003, long time ago. He's been retired for a long time. But Harvey was the Director of Parks and Recreation in Germantown, Tennessee. So Harvey, congratulations on being a legend.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Not too many people would have ever thought that I would be a legend, except maybe in my own mind. But I'm humbled, but it's a pleasure to be here, Mark.
So, having known you for, it's probably been 25, maybe 30 years, back when we both had brown hair,
Yeah.
that we first met. I think it was at Southern Region.
Yeah, that's
at one
true.
of those conferences.
That's true.
So, Harvey, tell us a little bit about your career and how you ended all the way in Germantown, because I know you're an Ole Miss fan.
Absolutely. And in fact, I had started my career when I was at Ole Miss doing some undergraduate work and what have you. And I've been a sportsman all of my life, just loved to play sports and enjoyed doing sports. And I thought one day that I might end up being a coach, being a teacher at least. So in my hometown of Oxford, Mississippi, while going to school, I enjoyed sports, but the local park and recreation department did not have any adult sports programs at all. In fact, they had mostly children's programs and very few sports programs at that time. So I took it upon myself, knowing a lot of people who wanted to play sports, to approach the park commission about organizing a men's softball league and using one of their ball fields. They gave me permission to do that, and so I organized an 8-team men softball league for that year, and ran that program, and we had a lot of fun. And the park commission considered that being part of their program, which they didn't mind me doing, and I certainly didn't mind doing that. But then following that season, football season approached, and some of the guys says, "Hey, let's play some football." So we approached them again about using the field, and the Oxford Park Commission agreed. So we got 6 teams of men's flag football up and played football. And then football season, basketball season started, and the next thing you know, I was volunteering for the Oxford Park Commission running adult sports program. And I did that for 2 or 3 years, and my sister decided she wanted to play softball one summer, so we said, okay, we'll organize some ladies softball team. We organized the ladies team, and they enjoyed that, and then it was ladies basketball and the men's basketball, and I did that for several years, just volunteering for the Parks and Recreation Department while taking some classes at the University of Mississippi. And then one day a new director came to town, Wayne Hudson, and Wayne came from New Albany as director there. And he called me into his office one day and he said, "I'd like to hire you part-time to run our sports program for adults." I said, "But I'm already doing that." Yes, I know. I want to pay you to do that. And I never could figure out why he wanted to pay me to do something that I was already doing for free, but I accepted his offer anyway. And that was my first part-time job with the Parks and Recreation Department. I did that for several years while serving as a sports editor for the local newspaper there and working for the journalism department at the University of Mississippi in addition to going to school. And then one day he offered me a full-time job to operate the sports program and organize them. And after much consideration, then I accepted that and started in. So my first job was sports director for the Oxford Park Commission. And I think that was in 1968 when I hired on full-time. And I did that until 1974, and I was offered a job in Clay County, that's down in West Point, Mississippi, as recreation superintendent for the Clay County Recreational District. And I did that for a full 14 months. They were wonderful 14 months, and I was enjoying it, and we were creating a department. But then a conflict arose between the director at the Oxford Park Commission and the park board, and he resigned. So they called me and asked me if I'd like to have that particular job. And I readily agreed and went back to Oxford, and I served there until 1980 as director, until Biloxi, Mississippi called. And I took a job in Biloxi, Mississippi in 1980 and stayed there for 3 years. Worked those 3 years, and those were wonderful times, but during that period of time, we had a transition in government. Went from the mayor, mayor commission form of government to a mayor, strong mayor, city council form of government. Oh. And the man who won ran on the platform that he was going to streamline government, going to do away with some departments, abolish a lot of them. There were about 22 departments and 22 department heads at that time. But the Park and Recreation Department was fragmented. We had senior programs being run by the aging. We had historic facilities and programs being managed by the Historic Commission, and even the football stadium was under a different commission. The Parks Department and the Recreation Department was nothing more really than recreation program, and we weren't doing much of that. We had a few recreation centers. In fact, one of the major recreation centers was under the auspices of the mayor's department. They took care of that particular building. So I was in charge of a recreation department. We had some pretty good discussions about how that should be set up and what have you, but I stayed there until 1980, and the city of Germantown called. And I went to the city of Germantown as Parks and Recreation Director in 1980, September of 1983. And my intention was to go there and spend 2 years, 3 years at max, and then move on to North Carolina, where I had a lot of friends in the park and recreation profession on the thing. But I stayed in Germantown for 20 years, and then I retired in that. I forgot all about North Carolina. The folks treated me extremely well. They pay me exceptionally well, more than I deserved. I can say that now that I'm retired. And they allowed me to run my department without much interference, and that meant an awful lot to me. They were good to me, and I enjoyed Germantown. So after 20 years, I finally decided that I would retire, and I retired on January the 31st, 2003.
Harvey, tell us, 20 years in one department, particularly to stay 20 years at the top of the department, can sometimes be quite a challenge. Tell us a little bit about what you found in Germantown when you first got there and how you shaped it into what you left, because Germantown, you left a tremendous legacy there.
Germantown, as I mentioned, was really good to me. I went to Germantown, as I said, in September 1983, and it was a small community of about 20,000 at that time, but it was an affluent community. They did have about $30 million in reserves at that time for such a small community. That's an awful lot of money. And they had a couple of parks. They had a lot of undeveloped parkland, but they did not have that many parks that were developed. And a couple of the parks that were inside the city at the time belonged to Shelby County. And Shelby County did not do too much with those. They didn't have the resources to do it, and they expected Germantown to do it, but Germantown didn't have the authority to do it, so there were a lot of problems with that situation. I remember going to Germantown. The city manager at the time, who had been managing the department because the other director had been dismissed, managing that department all summer long, so he was ready for a park and recreation director to come in and take over. But I remember him telling me when I came in, he said, Mr. Faust, he said, I've got some good news and some bad news. And I thought, oh, that's all I need is some bad news. I'm up here, they're going to get rid of me. But I got there and found out the good news was that I had about $800,000 for the budget for that particular year. For a community of 20,000 people back that time, that was a pretty good budget, so I felt pretty good about that. And then he said, but the bad news is I've already spent it all. You have to understand, this was September. The budget didn't go into effect until July, so from July to September, he had spent all the money. But I came in at a time when he had been running the department. He knew what was needed there, the resource that was needed to operate and manage that particular department at the time. And he also knew that the undeveloped property had to be maintained and taken care of, as well as the few acres that we had developed. The problem was he didn't have the resources to do it, nor the equipment to do it, so he went out and spent the money and got the resources, and he got the materials and equipment. So when I got there, pieces were already in place to help fill in the puzzle on the thing. We had one recreation program, not one program, but one part of a recreation program, which was cultural arts, and it was run by one staff member. Most of the other areas, there were no programs that were run by the city, but they were run by other departments or youth agencies out in the city. And the community looked at kids first. So there were not any adult programs taking place either. So cultural arts were pretty much what we had, plus a lot of undeveloped property and maintaining a couple ball fields and what have you for the kids. So that's what I went into. I might mention also that after I took the job, I found out that Germantown had had 3 directors in a matter of 3 years, and I was the 4th one within that 3-year period. So some of my peers said, Harvey won't make it too long in that
Did you wait a while to buy a house?
Yeah, actually I did. I rented for about 6 months and then bought me a condo into there because I still wasn't too sure. But no, as it turned out, it was a great move. The mayor and board of aldermen, as well as city manager, had made a commitment to Parks and Recreation, and it was my responsibility then to come in and make some changes to see that it was carried out. I also remembered that the city manager gave me a list of about 5 pages of things that he thought needed to be done. And he gave that list to me and said, I don't expect that to be done tomorrow, but do it as you can and as money is presented to you. Now, I didn't have to worry too much about the budget. Although he had spent the money, he made sure that there was money there when he knew what I needed. The satisfying part about that experience was that this was September. By the end of the year, before Christmas, staff had completed all of those projects that he had done. And they had begun to take pride in their work. People began to recognize the department as being a mover and a shaker, and so it became a lot easier for us to do things. And we began to spend a lot of money and develop a lot of parks, involve a lot of people, and celebrate a lot of successes in the city of Germantown. And it was one of the fastest growing cities in the South, and maybe in the nation at the time. It's now about 42,000 people. But it was about 40,000 when I retired. So you can see how fast the growth was.
Sure.
A lot of visionary people involved, in the community supported the Parks and Recreation, and staff supported Parks and Recreation, and we were quite successful there.
Well, can you talk a little bit about some of your mentors that helped shape you in your philosophies and what really gave you a passion for Parks and Recreation that you then incorporated into helping Germantown grow and develop?
Yeah, I've had so many mentors in my career, and it's really not fair to talk about just one, but several come to mind, and I'll share with you. The very first mentor that I had was my first boss, Wayne Hudson. Wayne instilled in me at the time that I should keep good records. I should document what I'm doing. I should have some good records about my programs and when the program started, how many people you had participating in the programs, and where you held them, and all of those good things, so I could pass them on to someone else if I ever needed to. Records back in Mississippi in the 1960s and early 1970s was something that not too many people were concerned about. You have to understand, during that time in Mississippi, we had small departments, 1-2-man department or 2-person department. Those individuals didn't think too much about record keeping because they were the ones that were doing all the work anyway. They knew when the work needed to be done. They knew what needed to be done, and the times of the day and the times of the year it needed to be done. So record keeping wasn't a big situation with them. With Wayne Hudson, it was different, and Wayne encouraged me to do that. I know at the time that we applied for a lot of grants because there was a lot of money from the OBOR and then the Land Water Conservation Funds and a lot of money in grants if you knew how to write a grant or if you had records to back up what you were proposing. And because of our record keeping, because Wayne was ahead of his time back in the 60s and 70s, Oxford got much more grant money than most other folks in the state. We got more than our fair share during that period of time. And it was because of our record keeping. So I learned that from Wayne. Keep good records and document. Later on, I really found out how important documentation was when everybody would sue you for the least little thing that was taking place. But if you had it documented, particularly if you were getting on to an employee and you had to discipline an employee, you needed those records and what have you. And documentation proved to be worthwhile at that point too. But that was Wayne. Wayne taught me that. Bill Byrd was another mentor of mine out of Miami-Dade County, Florida. I know you know Bill,
Yes.
Coming from Florida. And Bill encouraged me to be aggressive, to fight for what I believed was right and to push on. Even though there may not be any money there now, don't give up on a good idea. Keep that idea and fight for it and promote that idea as much as you can. He told me on many occasions, be aggressive. Don't give up. And you know Bill, he never gave up, and he
No,
created
it was amazing what he accomplished.
quite a program there. So Bill Byrd was another one I had. I even had mentors that didn't even realize that they were my mentors. If you think about John Davis, he came out of Georgia and headed up to the National Recreation Park Association. I think about General Dean Tice at NRPA, Tom Martin of Southern Region in Georgia, Roger Brown. Those people had tremendous organizational skills and wonderful people skills. And I learned more from those just soaking it up. They didn't even realize that they were mentoring me, but I surrounded myself with people like that and got next to them as often as I could without irritating the heck out of them. And listened to what they had to say and soaked up as much of it as I possibly could. So, yeah, people like that instill things in you and they help shape your philosophy. And, you know, my philosophy in Parks and Recreation, when I think about Wayne Hudson, for example, it was inclusion, not exclusion. Our programs were all white that we ran in Oxford at the time, and Wayne said, that's not right. We're going to change that. So we started including other folks. And even with people with disabilities, when we didn't have the facilities designed for people to be able to participate in those programs, then he said, we're going to make this right. We're going to try our best to do it. He would have loved the American with Disability Act if it had come back during the 60s and 70s.
Boy, you guys were way out in front of everybody.
Yeah, well, he did a marvelous job with it. And it's people like that who kind of shape your philosophy on the thing, inclusion and not exclusion. And I always thought recreation is recreation. And while there's place in sports for competitive sports and recreation sports, I don't believe in eliminating people from programs. I think it's very important that those folks who don't have the skills be able to learn the skills. Ironically, the ones who have the skills are the ones that enjoy the games and the activities, and those who don't have the skills are the ones sitting on the beach where they'll never learn the skills. And so they're forced to be on the sideline or they're eliminated. And that's one of the sad things about competition. So we need those recreation activities that we can include everybody and keep everybody happy and doing the things that we all deserve to do. And we build facilities for strong, healthy young people and adults, and we have a tendency to forget about those who have the disabilities and non-ambulatory, and so we always need to keep that in mind. And I picked up a lot of that from Wayne Hudson and the way that he went through life, and I'll always admire that man.
Sounds like somebody I wish I would have met.
Yeah, Well, Wayne was not too active outside the state of Mississippi, but you can ask almost anybody in the state of Mississippi about Wayne Hudson. They'll tell you he was a fine man and fine gentleman too.
Sounds like it. Harvey, I know that professionalism and things like standards were very, very important to you as a director and as a leader in our field. And when you were in Germantown, Germantown was one of the early cities to actually become a certified agency. Can you talk about what professionalism meant and how you conveyed that and its importance to your staff?
Yeah, I think they had already understood that how we were going to go through our department and how we were going to manage our department, because we had already established goals and objectives and an operational manual and a manual of procedures. So we had all of those things in place, and we did that when I went to Germantown. So it didn't come as a surprise to them when we started talking about going through the accreditation process. I remember Betty Vandersmith and Ray Kasai coming to talk to one of the groups that I was involved with in the National Recreation Park Association at one of our conferences on the thing, encouraging people to get involved with the accreditation process. I think that process started around 1994, somewhere into there, but this was 1995 that he was beginning to push that. And so he came in, and I'm thinking, well, we can do that. We can do that in Germantown. I just know we can do that. So I went back to talk to staff and said, look, there's this wonderful program called accreditation that all we have to do is abide by 153 or 54 standards. And I said, that's not too many. When you think about the police department who's got 500 or 700, we only have 150 something. We can do this. And they looked at me like I was some kind of crazy guy, came out of Mars somewhere on the thing, because they already had plenty to do. It wasn't that we needed the accreditation to improve as much as it was to prove that we were abiding by standards and so forth. And that was a wonderful opportunity for staff to get involved with the accreditation process and learn at the same time that our city met those standards and that we could justify our existence based on the standards that the accreditation process brought to it. And not only did it help us from the standpoint of being recognized in the community, but it also helped us with budgetary matters and what have you as well. And staff was very thankful, because they had been hounding me for quite some time about improving their budgets and so forth and so on. And so this was an opportunity for us to do that. And it just fell right in with what our desires were in the city of Germantown, to have a very strong, progressive park and recreation agency, one that not only our city and citizens could be proud of, but we could be proud of ourselves.
When I first met you, it was through the National Recreation Park Association. Talk about how you first started getting involved in professional associations, and what you feel the benefits of being involved professionally in your professional associations is for somebody.
Yeah, we could talk a long time on that, because that's a passion of mine. I'll go back to my first job when I was hired at the Oxford Park Commission as sports director. I was informed by Wayne Hudson that he expected me to attend some workshops and some conferences and what have you. And I told Wayne at the time, I said, look, I'll stay here and run your programs and handle the home front. You go to those conferences and conventions on the thing. The thing that popped into my mind when you talked about conventions was the old adage that it's a party time, that we go down and stay out all night drinking and just partying and having a good time on the thing. And that wasn't my style. I was not interested in that. I'd stay home and do it and let Wayne go attend the conferences. Imagine my surprise when he insisted that I go to something like a Southern Regional Conference, and I get there and find myself surrounded by people like Bill Byrd and Jim Colley and Roger Brown and Thad Studstill and Jim Spain, all of those individuals. Boy, I was like a sponge. I'm just trying to soak up everything that I can learn from those individuals. And I realized, hey, boy, this is pretty neat. I can learn some stuff through this. And from then on, he didn't have any problems getting me to attend conferences and what have you. I joined the National Recreation Park Association in 1968 and tried to get involved with it. But mostly I'd attend some workshops and some conferences and file my conference reports and what have you. And then just sit around and talk to people like yourself, trying to find out what you were doing and what's taking place. If I had a problem, somebody else had that problem as well. And if I could just find the person who had that problem and had the solution to that problem, I could go back to my hometown and maybe I could put some of what I learned into effect and maybe resolve some of my difficulties at the same time. So that was my start into the profession. Now, if you want to get something out of a profession, you need to put something into a profession. So, in other words, when somebody asks you to do something to serve or to put an educational session on, then I think you should respond to those. They're not going to ask you to do something they don't think that you can handle. Mm-hmm. So you need to give back and to be involved with that profession, because I think you get more out of it when you put something into it. So the profession became a driving force for me, and I began to encourage my staff when I became director. You need to go, you need to attend all the sessions, you need to file a conference report when you get home, and let's see what we can do with that. Now, I encouraged them also to attend the social functions and to socialize with their peers and to have a good time. But I expected two things from them. I expect them to be in all the meetings that they could attend and not be sleeping in the next morning. And I expect them to file a conference report when they got home. And that conference report was shared with other staff members, with elected officials, and anyone else who wanted to know how we were spending the taxpayers' money. Mm-hmm. And that served us well. And I think as a result of those conference reports and our staff being sent and following up on that, we never had too much trouble in most of the cities that I was in, especially in Germantown, of getting monies for our travel and for our education budget, because they could see what staff was learning. Mm-hmm. There were three things I want to know in that conference report. I want to know what sessions you attended. I want to know what you learned in those sessions. And then I wanted to know how we could apply what you learned back to our department and our community. And staff was pretty good about following through on those things.
Mm-hmm. It's funny to hear the names that you mentioned. And I mean, so many of them are names that I sought out too.
Yeah.
And what was really amazing was, I mean, you know, that's 20 years ago, back when, you know, I was kind of a young pup. And what was amazing is those people, they were at the pinnacle of our profession. They were willing to share information. They were willing to take the time to talk to us young guys at the time. And then they were also willing to take your phone call when they got back home, no matter how busy they were. If you called and said, hey, I got a problem, can I pick your brain one more time?
Right, right.
How does it feel to be in the same group as those other legends? Because everybody you've mentioned is a legend.
They are, and if I'm a legend, it's because of individuals like that and staff members that I work with, because nobody comes into this world knowing anything. They have to learn it from someone. And if you can learn from people like that, what better group of folks is there to follow around in our profession than folks that I mentioned? There are a lot more that I haven't mentioned, but if we were to sit here and name all those individuals, we'd take up all of our time to do that. Because we have some great people in this profession. It's a wonderful profession that we all should enjoy, and we should all give back and pay forward, because it's given a lot to me, I know, and I'm sure you feel the same way.
Yeah, I do. You know, I look at myself and I know there's a couple of things that really raise the goosebumps on my arms, that just give me the chills and really fuels my passion about Parks and Recreation. What are a couple of things that gave you goosebumps and kept you going?
I think in addition to some of the things that I just talked to you about, I had an opportunity to, during the time that I was in Oxford and after I retired from Germantown, to do some adjunct teaching at the University of Mississippi. And I spent 5 years there at the university back in the 70s and early 80s. teaching some management courses and some foundation courses. And the students, my involvement with the students at the time, because it's difficult sometimes to just, most of them would come out thinking, well, I'm going to get me a job as a director. I'm going to be just like you, Mr. Faust. I'm going to have my director's job when I graduate. I don't know too many people who graduate from college and go right into a director's job. They do other things. But it's exciting to work with students and young people in the profession. And I get goosebumps just thinking about how some of those folks have gone on to do great and wonderful things. And I played a little role in getting them started in their job. I also get a kick out of kids going into to the profession for the first time, attending a conference and what have you, and see them come out and they want to load themselves down with all this educational material and so forth. And I'm saying, wait a minute, you know, half these people send that and mail that to you. You don't have to lug it around. No, they may not do that. And I enjoy watching the kids as they get excited about those. I've always said one of the hardest things to do is to deal with people in this profession, but one of the best things and the nicest thing to do is to deal with people in this profession. So it's a two-edged sword. But, you know, I've had a lot of wonderful opportunities come my way, and it's because there are a lot of people out there that have paved the way for me, and a lot of my staff members at the time. And I like to refer to them as co-workers because we were all managing and directing those departments at the same time, just in there working hard. And I get excited when I see that. I also get excited when I see some of my previous staff members become directors and managers of their own, and then they're out developing staff and see their staff come along. I've been around long enough to see all of that take place, and it's nice, and it's wonderful. I just wish that we weren't having such hard times in the profession, that we had to be so revenue driven that we've got to go out and develop so many revenue producing facilities and programs that we can't stay with our core values and core benefits of the recreation thing quite as much as we could before. But I'm proud of this profession. I really am, and I'm happy that I was part of it for so long.
You talked a little bit earlier about, you know, how important it was to be involved in professional associations, but you mentioned that in Germantown you enjoyed a lot of community support. Talk about how important being involved in the community is to building that community support.
I don't know that I can stress too much. Sometimes we get involved with the community or our jobs, and we just go to the workplace and we do that, and we're tired when we go home, and because it's late when we get home a lot of time. We don't feel like going out and visiting the civic clubs and joining civic clubs and getting active and volunteering in the other parts of the community on it. But we need to be seen in that community. If we want to be a viable part of the community, then we've got to get out and participate. The same way with the profession. If you're going to really get something out of the profession, you've got to give back. If you want to get something out of your community, you've got to give back something of yourself. And I know we as directors and as staff of our various agents give an awful lot to the community. But people can't see that as often. And there's some self-satisfaction to being involved with the church and being involved with a civic group. And I was involved with a Rotary Club for a number of years, and I love the Rotary Club, and I love the work that the Rotary Club does, and a lot of them do marvelous things. But the club that I was in first started out, a lot of business people didn't have a lot of time in the community, so if something needed to be done, they just wrote a check. Mm-hmm. Well, I'm a park and recreation director. I couldn't afford to write the checks that they could write, but I could give myself. I could get out in the community, and I could help. I could get out and be involved with Habitat for Humanity. I'd go out and help somebody build a house. And it's not like I'm doing all the carpentry work, but I can carry boards and I can hammer a nail and do those kinds of things. Mm-hmm. And so I enjoyed that portion of civic work. And then, of course, I enjoyed church. But I think it's so important for you to get involved with your community, let people see and put a face to the name. I recall an article that I read. This gentleman in Germantown wanted to build croquet. He was a big croquet, and he was good at croquet. And we were going to establish a park and put 2 putting greens within the park. Everybody had wanted, when we were doing the plan, everybody wanted putting greens. And said, okay, we'll do that. Well, Bill wanted croquet courts. And by the time the money came around, there were croquet courts in that plan instead of tennis courts. But Bill's point was that he met with the assistant director for 2 or 3 years. He never met Harvey Faust. He didn't know. He knew Harvey Faust was there, but he didn't know Harvey Faust. And it was only after we started building those croquet courts where I picked up the phone and called Bill that he realized that I knew who he was. But my assistant director filed his report. We had staff meetings every week, so I knew exactly who Bill was and what he wanted. And when it came time for that resource, and I called him, he said, finally, I meet Harvey Faust. Well, that makes an impression to you. You need to be out. You need to let people know who you are, and you need to work within the community and give back. At the same time, they begin to recognize you. Now, I like to do a lot of work behind the scenes, but when it comes to community work, I like to be out in front and do some things. And I think it's very important. And you put a face with an individual, and suddenly it becomes a lot more difficult to say no when you pick up the phone and call them.
Yeah, you're right there.
Yeah.
With everything that you've accomplished in your career and in your life, this is probably going to be a tough question. What's the one thing you're the most proud of?
Yeah, that is a tough question because there's several things that I'm extremely proud of, and I'll give you a couple quickly. Every department, I worked in 5 different departments as director. Now I worked in more departments, but only 5 as a director. Every department in every city that I went to, the previous director had been fired, and morale was low, and the expectations weren't very high on it. And after I had been there, and when I left each one of those cities, then Parks and Recreation was a viable part of the community. We were a viable part of the government, and people began to have a little bit more respect for the Parks and Recreation profession because of what staff had done during those period of time. So I'm proud of the fact that when we entered into those situations, expectations were low. But when I left those situations, they were all viable departments, had probably experienced some of the most prolific growth that they had experienced in quite some time. And staff was doing a wonderful job. And so I'm proud really of that. I think the other thing, and I mentioned, kind of hit on this earlier, that really makes me happy is staff development. Mm-hmm. You go into a situation where the director has been terminated and people don't have a high expectation, and perception becomes reality. You perceive that people don't care what you're doing as a staff member, or you perceive that what you do doesn't make a difference in the community, then that becomes reality. And suddenly you're thinking, well, there's no need of doing this. And the community says, well, we don't have a park and recreation department. So it becomes necessary for staff to change, and staff has to understand that the big picture is, no matter what my job is, it's like filling in a puzzle. If you leave a piece of the puzzle out, the puzzle is never complete. So if you're only hired to cut grass, then you need to realize how important cutting grass is. And if you miss cutting the grass on a particular day or a particular week or on a schedule, then suddenly people said, oh, wait a minute. They're not maintaining the parks. They're not doing what they need to do. So it's critical that staff have a big picture. And I'm very confident that in every department that I went into, when I left, staff knew what the big picture was all about.
As we kind of wrap up, any last bits of advice, particularly for young people that are either just starting in the profession, or got any good words for us old guys that have been around for a while?
Well, let's talk about the young people. I mentioned my involvement with the University of Mississippi with students on the thing, and I always encourage students to get involved with their profession, to be able to get out and network and attend conferences and workshops. And I always told them, when you go to these conferences and workshops, have you some business cards printed up. It may only be 5 or 10 of those business cards, but you can get them printed up. Go and find people that you want to meet and give them a business card and ask them one in exchange, and begin building that network. So you get involved with the profession. If you want a job in this business, you better put yourself out there and let them see that you're progressive enough to attend conference, that you're interested enough in learning about the trends and what's going on in this profession. And when you interview for a job, you say, gee, Mr. Faust, I met you at the Southern Regional Conference, or I met you in Phoenix, Arizona at the National Congress. Do you remember me? Well, maybe I do and maybe I don't, but I've got the card. Mm-hmm. And that sparks something. So get involved, network, and learn about the profession. And don't be bashful about introducing yourself to people when the time comes. As far as us old guys and what we do, I don't know that I can tell folks that have been around a long time anything that they don't already know. Maybe one thing that I can advise everybody, these are hard times. The economics right now are just not really helping park and recreation profession. It's extremely tough. We're trying to find money every way that we can. We're trying to produce money every way we can. I'm saying don't give up. We've been through hard times before. Profession is going to be there, and it's going to come out stronger than ever. We just got to quit depending upon things like the federal government to give us land and water conservation funds. The little money that they're giving out now is not helping us, mm-hmm. And so our expectations are not great for getting some of that. But don't give up. There are other avenues, and while it's sad, we need to keep fighting. And as Bill Byrd would say, be aggressive. Be aggressive. Get out there and let people know what the needs are. And if you do get the money, spend it wisely and then celebrate your successes. I think it's so important that we celebrate those successes. And I don't mean going out with the boys and having a beer when you get through with the program. I mean, take that to the staff and to the community, invite the mayor, invite the press, let them know what's being accomplished out through there, and let them know the role that they played in making that happen. Because if we do that, this profession will remain strong, and people are always want their parks and they always want to recreate, but they need to do that in a good, healthy environment.
Well, Harvey, I want to thank you very much because you helped our profession be strong and be what it is today. And I want to congratulate you on being a legend in our profession, and I look forward to seeing you for a number of more years.
Thank you, Mark. I appreciate that very much.
Congratulations.
Thank you, my friend.